All right, I am here now at the NCMR with Tim Hwang. Tim is the founder of the Awesome Foundation. What's the full name of it again?
The Awesome Foundation for the Arts and Sciences.
Awesome, and which you can find at awesomefoundation.org. Tim, thanks so much for sitting down with me, man.
Definitely, thanks for having me.
All right, so I saw you on a panel yesterday, and I've heard of the Awesome Foundation before.
Oh, great.
But like the whole. When you described how it actually came about was a really funny story and a great story. Can you just tell us how did it come about?
Sure, definitely. So I got together with a group of friends in 2009. And we were like, well, it's really difficult to get money for like cool projects. And it's funny too because nonprofits, they have a huge amount of overhead, right? So if you ask for too little money, they actually won't give it to you. So it's kind of funny. It's like easier to get a lot of money than it is to get a tiny bit of money. So we said, well, what if we created this thing called the Awesome Foundation for the Arts and Sciences? And the model will be really simple. We'll get 10 people. They'll each contribute $100 a month, and we'll form a $1,000 grant, and it'll just be given up front, cash. When we started, actually, it was just cash in a paper bag. It'd just be like, here, do your thing. We were never here, And so we opened it up, and we were like, let's just see who submits to this totally crazy thing. And just the outpouring was enormous. We got like hundreds of grant applications in the first round, and we funded this woman who basically wanted to build a hammock that was 25 feet by 50 feet. And I was like, that's totally cool. We'll totally fund it. You're right. Like, that totally matches our agenda, Yeah. And so we funded her. She did it. And then what was really interesting, we started hearing from other places being like, we're very interested in the Awesome Foundation. How do we start a chapter? And we're like, this is kind of, it's a scam. It's like, we're not actually a real foundation. It's like an agreement between 10 people to do this silly thing. But we said, if you bring 10 people together, you can have a chapter. And we've kind of grown from there. So we're now in 70 chapters all around the world, 2 in Mongolia, 1 in Ulaanbaatar, another one in Chukbatar. Awesome. Apparently there's 2 Batars. I had no idea. But we're South Africa, all over Europe. Canada has a number of chapters, opening up in Southeast Asia. And so it's just kind of expanding. There's no promotion at all. It's just this weird blob of philanthropic giving.
Yeah. So the giant hammock is awesome. What are some of the other the best maybe your top 3 or 4 things that you guys have actually come across?
So there's 2 I love to talk about. One of them is the one that the DC chapter founded, and they basically funded a woman to basically recreate an alleyway that would simulate the scene from Indiana Jones when he's running away from the big boulder. So they got one of those Zorbs, which is like an enormous plastic ball, and it basically someone would walk behind it rolling it, and you'd be forced to run away while the music played. And they give you the costume and the whip, and all the video from it is hysterical. But we funded this stuff other than fun-ish art projects. So we also funded a guy by the name of Jeff Warren, who works at the MIT Media Lab. And he was working on a project called Grassroots Mapping. It's basically kites and repurposed digital cameras. And the idea was to do basically low-flying satellite photography, essentially. And so he was working with communities in the Gulf when the oil spill happened to basically track the progress of the ecological damage, right? Because no one was doing any of that. And it will inevitably become very important when this stuff ends up in court.
They can use that in Arkansas right now, actually.
Oh, really?
There's a pipeline spill.
Stuff like that. And so they kind of open sourced the design of it and everything, and we basically funded him to do a prototype. And he was later, I think, awarded almost $1 million grant from the Knight Foundation to kind of pursue that work. And so it's kind of a great success story on the other side of the house. We call it usually, it's the debate between flamethrowers and orphans. It's like, how do you combine the two to fund really awesome things that also do a lot of social good?
So how ultimately, people apply for these grants. How ultimately, how do they get chosen at that point? What happens after people apply? Is the 10 people who have the chapter ultimately make the choice? How does it actually work?
Yeah, so the trustees actually make the decision. And the idea is to keep it as lightweight as possible. So the application is something you can fill out in pretty much 15 minutes. And then the idea is that the trustees will basically meet. And each chapter has a different way of deciding. It depends on kind of how the local chapter is structured. But pretty much it's those 10 people. And they just decide what to fund. And it's completely, they can fund anything they want.
Right.
So, yeah.
So you're using this whole, again, it was an idea that you guys just started as a joke, essentially.
Yeah, right. And that was way out of control.
Yeah,
right,
exactly.
Right.
But so, we're at the NCMR. You're on a panel on just people trying to, different types of groups trying to figure out the best ways of raising funding. Do you think that is... is there what can progressive groups learn from what you guys have actually done, and how can people learn from the model of just of how that actually works? Because what you're doing is very unique, though. It's just doing these really great, awesome stuff. I mean, it's in the
Thanks, you're right.
It's what it's called accurately. And so,
appreciate that.
but so like, what can other groups that are trying to do any different types of activism kind of and fundraising actually learn from what you guys have done, in your opinion?
So there's two really interesting lessons, I think. One of them came up on the panel yesterday, which I think is like worth sort of reiterating, I guess, which is that, there's been a lot of hype about crowdfunding, and crowdfunding will save journalism, and et cetera. And everybody quite rightly points out, well, it looks like Kickstarter and stuff, these kind of crowdsourcing markets are very good for very spiky types of engagement, right? So it's like very good for like projects. Like, I really want to do a report on this. I really want to do an X on this. But the problem is there's not a whole lot of like sustained giving. We haven't really designed our platforms to encourage that kind of like ongoing financial commitment.
Yeah.
Whereas you actually have that in the Awesome Foundation. And it's extremely personalized because it's like 10 people, the 10 people meet the person who they're funding. And then the person who's getting funded is like, oh, I got an envelope of cash and there's 10 people who are watching me now. So then I move ahead.
Yeah.
And so I think that's one thing, right? Is distinguishing between sort of like crowdsourcing markets and really like a community that can continue giving money over time. We were talking to some people about using it for publishing, for instance. So the idea is a book club that commissions its own book. So you have 10 people, you're like, we really want to read a book at Narwhals or something, and you like hire a freelance writer who's really good at investigating that stuff. But you can imagine doing that for all sorts of things. Like, I really want to learn about, garbage collection or corruption in the city, right?
Yeah.
Just send people out to look into that story. And that is like crowdfunding in the sense that a number of people are giving money, but it's more personalized, right? It's more direct relationship, which I think might have a really powerful effect.
Yeah.
I think the second thing is maybe not to let technology get in the way all the time, right? So it turns out that like you can use all these tools, but if there's no community backing it, it doesn't really take you all that far. I mean, Awesome Foundation technologically is extremely crude, right? Like, you'll see our website. I mean, like, we just spruced up the website, but before that, it was like awful. And the way it was run, it was just 10 people hanging out. I mean, like a group of friends who were like, what's fun stuff?
Yeah.
And that kind of core has been really powerful in terms of like driving stuff forwards. I think those are two things.
Yeah. Not let technology hold you back, and that it's not even, because I mean, your main jump happened when it was a very lo-fi site and stuff, essentially, and it was more about the community and that actually drove the whole thing.
Right. And it turns out that like I think that there's like, if you look at the history of websites, right, it turns out that like really crappy looking websites have awesome communities, right? So like you think about like Wikipedia most notably, but also like Reddit and 4chan and like all these sites with incredibly powerful communities like look completely terrible. and I think that's actually, there's something there, right? Which is the fact that like you should actually let technology be something that you build after the fact, right? It's like our community is really demanding it, and now we have to implement all this technology.
The idea is the main idea is the first idea is the important thing. The technology is mostly secondary.
That's how I see it. Yeah, right. And that's been good to us, right? Like, so normally when chapters want some new technology, our main strategy is procrastination and laziness. We're kind of like, well, Awesome Foundation Central, I don't know, it doesn't really exist. So you have to build your own, right? So we have like, so in Montreal, the Awesome Foundation is La Fondation Formidable, and they had to build their own bilingual site basically, and I think that's built a lot of robustness because basically the chapters have to build their own tools, they have to bring together their own community, and whether or not they succeed or fail, it's totally on them. And I think that's built a lot of robustness over time, right? Is to actually like put up kind of a bar, I guess you might say, to kind of organizing a chapter. Yeah.
Tim Hwang from the Awesome Foundation. The full name again? The Awesome
Foundation for the Arts and Sciences.
For the Arts and Sciences.
Yeah, we're technically a project of the Institute for Higher Awesome Studies.
Clearly.
Which is actually a real nonprofit now. So.
Awesome. But you can find it at awesomefoundation.org. Again, it's a great idea. And again, before I saw you on the panel, I'd heard of it before and saw the site. It's awesome.
Thanks.
Which
that, yeah.
So thanks for taking the time with me.
Definitely. Thank you.